Welcome back to the Get Loved Up podcast. I just want to, first of all, thank you so much for being here. It means so much for me to get your reviews and to get your comments and to get your feedback from the show. And you know, my intention is to inspire in the areas of spirituality, well-being, and entrepreneurship, and reach as many amazing guests as possible so they can share their perspective and we can talk and really talk about what's going on in the world and how we're dealing with it. So today I have an amazing guest for you. And boy, do we have a lot to talk about when it comes to mental health. This has been a really important topic for the entire year, especially going through the pandemic. And now we are at an all-time high of seeing a lot of mental health cases, a lot of suicide cases, and we have to take control of our mental health. So today's guest is going to help us do just that. Let me read you a little bit of why this woman is so amazing. Uplifting perspectives and elevating voices to nurture the lived experiences of Black girls and women, Marline Francois-Madden is the transformative social worker, educator, advocate, and policy-facing therapist developing consistent action plans that drive change. Marline Francois-Madden is the CEO of Heart Empowerment Counseling Center, best-selling author of The State of Black Girls, licensed therapist, speaker, and entrepreneur. She has over 15 years of experience in the mental health field and has become a sought-after expert in mental health, self-care, and equity for Black girls. Marline has shared her expertise at dozens of universities, colleges, community organizations, churches, conferences, including the Congressional Black Caucus for Women and Girls. She was nominated as a Changemaker by the White House Summit during the Obama administration and mindfully intersecting the connections between Black girls, policy, and mental health. Marline is a pivotal force who makes her mission to create equity in Black mental health with the astute awareness that equity and equality are not the same things. Marline holds a bachelor's degree in psychology from Penn State University, as well as a master's of social work from Rutgers University-Newark, and is currently pursuing a Ph.D. at Montclair State University. She serves as a committee chair on the National Association of Social Work, and this woman is fierce. Marline.
Hi, thank you for having me.
It is so wonderful. I just want to thank you for coming on. I was so excited when I read about you. First of all, to read your book. Second of all, just to be in conversation with you about the state of our mental health.
Yes, absolutely. It's an important time right now. It's definitely needed. And we know this pandemic has had an impact on a lot of people's well-being, just being home in the past year and a half.
Let's just start it off with a hot topic. Like when we got on the call, we could just start it right there and then we'll dive back because we have one of our most celebrated tennis players, Naomi, in this situation where she is standing up for her mental health. She is standing up and using her voice and her platform like we say we have to do, and she is still fine. Like I don't understand it. Can you help break down how detrimental this is to not only her as a woman, but also as a woman of color when trying to advocate for her own mental health?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what makes it very hard is the fact that this has been the way it has been designed in this country, where we overwork ourselves, this grind culture, and that we will be okay. And she made it very clear that, she wants to put her mental health first, and that she had suffered with depression. She has had, spousal depression, and also being an introvert and, feeling like she's not a public speaker and feeling like, I don't always want to do interviews, press interviews and press conferences. And I completely get it. She needs those moments of rest. And if that's not being valued, on top of that, this is during Mental Health Awareness Month that this happened. Not only Mental Health Awareness Month, we have to recognize that Naomi's also Japanese and Haitian. So it's also Asian American Pacific Islander Awareness Month. It's also Haitian Heritage Awareness Month, and also Mental Health Awareness Month. And all of this is happening in the month of May. And for them to not value any one of those three things, to recognize that she needs a break and say, okay, but yet no, instead, we're going to fine her. She's going to get a $15,000 fine because she doesn't want to do these press interviews. And so it's been really hard to see that she's not being valued in that moment. And it just shows you how this even happens in our day-to-day life with Black women, with minority women, where you are trying to move towards upward mobility in your job in a corporate setting. And when you need a break, no one values that. They're saying, well, you have to keep going. You have to do this. But yet now you feel like you have to perform, but you don't have a moment to just like rest and be present in that time.
And I am so proud of her, because at some point you have to say, I need to stop. And, you know, for what she did, saying, okay, you're not going to value my mental health. You're going to fine me anyway. Well, this is what I have to do to continue to protect myself. And I think it's a huge, fierce, and beautiful message of, if you're in a situation where you have expressed your needs clearly, this is what I need to be okay, and someone doesn't value that, how you have to set healthy boundaries in order to be okay. So I don't know how this is going to pan out, but I hope it pans out in all of our favor. Number one, just as an example of how you create healthy, first of all, how you communicate, like, this is what I need. She was very clear, I'm just shocked right now. So I can't wait to see how this unfolds. But I think she was very clear and she plays tennis, you're not hiring her to do press releases. I don't know if that's in the contract that you have to do that. But even if it is, maybe it's something that they need to consider taking out, because as she was saying, it is a lot. It is sometimes traumatizing for athletes, especially when it hasn't been good. We just left the pandemic. And for you to have no compassion over everything that we've been through, I just can't believe it. So thank you so much for covering that. And can you just share a little bit of how the state of Black girls is really, I think everyone, no matter what color, no matter what nationality, no matter what sex or race, needs to read this book to understand that we are not okay. Can you share a little bit about how you kind of unpack this for people?
Yes, definitely. So I created the State of Black Girls out of a necessity, because I got tired of not seeing books on the shelf that were designed for Black girls to give them strategies and tips to really help their mental health. And so for me, I would see the books on the shelves that did not represent Black girls. And then I would hear stories of Black girls dying by suicide. And the more and more I heard those stories, the more and more I said, there's something I need to do, but yet I know I can't reach every single girl in America. Every girl's not going to go to therapy. Every girl does not have access to therapy when we're talking about health equity. So I knew in that moment, I have to create something that is a tangible tool that I know can reach many people, whether they're US or international. So that is why the State of Black Girls was created, just to highlight the lived experiences of Black girls, whether it's their mental health, their school experiences, goal setting, how they have friendships with people, whether it's them dealing with trauma, whether it's civic engagement, interaction with police officers. So I wanted to touch on various layers of what it's like to be a Black girl, to touch on colorism and hair, to touch on self-esteem and social media. So that was part of the reason why I created it, because I wanted them to feel seen and heard when they pick up the book. So every chapter starts off with Dear Black Girl. It was very intentional. I wanted the book to be designed for the audience of adolescents. So that way, any adolescent girl that picks up the book feels like, I can see myself reading this.
Well, it definitely had that message. Let me tell you, I don't feel like you just could relate to me. I felt like you were reading my entire life story. Like almost every instance you have in that book, I've experienced. And I just cannot explain like how grateful I am and how much I hope every person listening just takes a moment to read the book. And I even told you before we started, like I'm willing to read it for you. I want it to be on audio because I know everyone's not a reader. Some people have a hard time reading, and the reason it's so important is because what you said, the acknowledgement of what we're going through and also knowing we're not alone. I definitely have times in my life where I felt like, is anybody else experiencing this? This is not, I just don't, I feel like I'm all alone. I feel like I'm by myself. What have you ever felt like that in your life? Like, you know what, I am the only one that feels this way. And what is your message to people who are feeling like that right now?
Yes, absolutely. I've definitely felt that way. So I am a survivor of child sexual abuse. So having to hold that in for so long and not tell my parents. So feeling like I was alone and other girls were not experiencing it. So for me, I just dived into magazines and I would read, Teen Vogue and 17 magazine and read the Q&A columns from Ask an Expert just to see if other girls were sharing those stories. And when I realized there were other girls all over that were sharing those stories, I'm like, wow, I can relate to this. But I still felt alone because I didn't have anyone to talk to about it. So my outlet was playing the piano at the time. That was my outlet, was playing the piano. And that was my go-to thing. I grew up in a very strict Christian household with, Haitian parents, Haitian immigrant parents. So just the whole bicultural identity of being Haitian in my household, but being a Black girl, being Black and being a girl when I leave my home and go to school. So then having to figure out the intersection of my identities, it was a lot to manage as an adolescent girl. But so I felt alone as far as when it came to my trauma. But when I got older, I recognized there were so many other people that went through it too.
And that's what's so amazing. I love that you touch on that because we want to feel like we're not the only one. And I think it is important to be able to share your story. I just read Oprah's book, What Happened to You? And it talked about how sharing your story is part of the healing. And I appreciate you sharing what happened to you when it comes to assault, because I've also experienced assault. And I know when I shared my story, I felt something in me like release. And then when I went to the doctor, I think a couple months later, they said, well, you don't have a cyst, but there's a place where there could have been a cyst. And I know when I told my story, it released that negative energy that was building itself inside of me. And there's no science that really talks as much about those things and how, another book that I read that I highly recommend, The Body Keeps Score, but it does. And to feel that in myself in that moment, it makes me so passionate about getting your book and this message of how important it is to release. And I love that you said piano is one of your ways to release. What other things do you do to kind of release some of that just trauma from the past and that you experience pretty much every day living in your skin?
Yeah. So for me, having community that loves you and cares about your authentic self, because I feel like as you grow into a professional, you're working as a professional Black woman, you're an entrepreneur, you're multifaceted. It can get very hard if you end up finding friends that are also like that, but yet you guys aren't connecting on an intimate, deeper level where you're being authentic and vulnerable. So for me, that's very important. A lot of my close girlfriends and guy friends I've known my entire life. I've known them for 35 years. So these are my close friends that I can call if I have any issue. I know if I'm not feeling my best, they're going to deliver some flowers, DoorDash, whatever I need, they're going to send it. So I think it's very important to have close friends, to have a tribe, people that you can rely on, people that get to see you for who you are and not the side of you that's always producing.
Right.
Because that's the side that people tend to see and they fall in love with.
Absolutely.
It's always, what do you do for a living when you meet people for the first time?
Mm-hmm.
Instead
Absolutely.
of, we
get caught up in that production and we feel like we are valued because we are producing. And that's why we put our value. But like you said, letting people see you when you're not your best, when you're not producing, when you don't feel like you have to be on is part of being authentically you. authentically and fiercely yourself. So can you share a little bit, just a little bit from your book, The State of Black Girls? Because I remember reading the contents and I'm just like, oh my goodness, this is every single thing that needs to be talked about.
Yeah. So the book, I am so proud of it. I'm so proud of this baby project that I created. So it's broken down to sections. So when you start off the book, it's starting off with topics that are related to like the lived experiences of Black girls, right? So whether it's about social media, sisterhood, self-esteem, and then it goes into mental health related topics. And the mental health related topics around, am I depressed? Am I anxious? I've been sexually abused. Now what? Are you suicidal or thinking about self-harm? And then even with the chapter that talks about depression, there's a chapter right after that that's designed for the parents. And it's a chapter that says, Dear Parents. So parents can have a space to read and say, okay, what do I do if my daughter is dealing with depression? And also the chapter that's on sexual abuse. The first sentence in there just talks about like, hey, if this chapter is too hard to read, skip it, take a break. It's okay. You do not have to sit through this chapter, because I want girls to know that they can go ahead and skip it and get back to when they're more comfortable or they have support around them to read that chapter. So I don't know if I have a favorite chapter in the entire book because I love all of them, but I will say the chapter that's on sexual abuse and the chapter that's also on Black girls, in white spaces. Two of those are my own lived experiences, just being a Black girl, going to private and public school and predominantly white spaces. And what was that like for me? So being able to share that and give them ideas and tips on what they can do if that's their story, I think for me, that's what I enjoyed, because I enjoyed being able to write about myself, but also connect it to what Black girls go through so they can say, wow, she's not just writing this because she's a therapist, but she's writing this because she also lived through this. She knows what it's like to be that person. So for me, it was very important to write about those topics. So I feel like the book is a really great go-to guide, like it says, go-to guide for creating safe spaces for Black girls. And I do believe this book is not just designed for Black girls, but also for, parents, mentors, educators, community organizers, elected officials, healers, anyone who works with Black girls or looking to create safe spaces for them. They should read this book.
100% agree. I absolutely agree. And I also feel like, those are two of my favorite chapters too, because those are things you don't feel like you can talk about. You don't know how to deal with. It's like, okay, I'm in this space and I just don't know what to do, or this has happened to me and I don't know who to tell and I don't feel comfortable. So I definitely think those are important things, especially as we're growing and we're trying to forge relationships and have these hard conversations, and we're being pressed on to have these hard conversations, and we know they're healing, but they're still very exhausting. And like you said, giving ourselves permission to say, no, not right now. You know what? I'm going to take a pause. And I think that's so important, even to go back to the story of Naomi. She's like, I need a pause. I need a little break right here. I'm not stepping out, but I need a pause. And then if you don't get that pause, you have to just take it after you've asked for it. And I appreciate you, giving us that I guess, permission to create healthy boundaries. And I think that's also important. And you point that out a lot. Like, you have to, if someone has been traumatized, you have to give them permission to step away, because all we know as Black women is produce content, produce babies, produce family, produce work, just produce everything. And that's what we've been conditioned to do. So it is actually very hard. And in my community, literally, it's a learning experience to practice self-care. It's a learned experience to actually say, put myself first. I feel so uncomfortable. Most women that I talk to, women of color and Black women specifically, feel uncomfortable practicing self-care outside of just, a little bit here and there. And so I think that this book is really going to open a lot of people's eyes of just how much is needed when it comes to our mental health.
With everything going on in the world, now is a perfect time to pour into yourself. If you've been thinking about joining the wellness community and learning more about your health and wellness and how to improve the well-being of others, then the Get Loved Up Holistic Health and Yoga Teacher Training is for you. We have a variety of offerings from the 100 Hour to get a taste of how holistic health and yoga can bless your life, and the 200 to 500 Hours to deep dive into the study of how meditation, breathwork, yoga, and mindful living can transform your health and the health of our world. Go to koyawebb.com/YTT for more details. I'll see you there.
And what do you think, and I'm going to go kind of deep here, but you can share whatever you feel comfortable sharing. What do you think is the hardest thing has been for you to deal with throughout your life so far?
If you think about that, that's a hard one. That's a hard one. I think one of the hardest things was when my father got really sick. He has heart issues, so he's still pretty sick. So when he first got sick, and I had just launched my business, so going into private practice, but still working a job, and you're supposed to help other people with their mental health concerns. But yet in that same moment, you're also, you're starting to feel like this buildup anxiety is happening. What if I get this phone call and it's that phone call that he doesn't make it? And they're talking about heart transplant and, bypass surgery and all these topics that are happening. And it was like he kept going in and out of the hospital at that time. And so for me, I had to sit there and show up for clients. And I remember just going into my office and my mom calling me like in between sessions, like, he's not doing too well. I think I'm going to call the ambulance, or I'm going to take him to the hospital. Like having those moments. And then I have to get off the phone with her because I have a client that just rang the doorbell and they're getting ready to come in. And I'm like, oh boy, what do I do? So I now have to be present for the next 45 minutes to an hour with a client, because people can sense your energy. If you're an empath, you can sense when someone's energy is off, when something's not right. And so, knowing, okay, are these existing clients that have known me for a while that I can say pardon me, I've never done this before. You worked with me for a very long time. I've never done this before. I may have an emergency that shows up in the next week or two. If so, we may have to move your session around. So preparing in advance so clients also don't feel abandoned in that moment, because I still have to offer a service to clients. So in that moment, that's when I realized okay, I'm going to have to slow down. What does this look like? Does it look like taking time off from work if I can? Being able to, I went on vacation actually the day my dad was getting bypassed. And that's, that could have created some family drama, but it didn't, because I spent a lot of time with him beforehand and staying up late at night along with him and my mom. And I'm also married too, and I live in a different state. So traveling over there to just spend time with them. And then, my brother came down from Cali to the East Coast just to stay with them and then my dad was like, yeah, go ahead, go on vacation. I'll see you when you come back. So then I went away for my own sanity. I needed a break. I needed to go away. And that was my break that I had. And when I came back, I was able to, at that point, he was in rehabilitation and, getting better, whatever better means when you are a heart patient. So I think for me, that was probably one of the hardest times that I could think of recently. But for me, I've been very intentional about boundaries, whether it's physical boundaries, emotional boundaries that I have, boundaries with the people I hang out with. If I notice that I hang out with someone and it's soaking up a lot of my energy, then I have to reconsider how much time am I going to allow them to have access to me. It's okay to not give everyone access to you or the same level of access to you. So for me, I'm very intentional with the boundaries that I set within my business and also my personal life. So that way I have something left over for me if an emergency shows up. I have some overflow for myself.
That is so important. Lisa Nichols has always sang one of my favorite closers, is like, fill your cup up so you can give from the overflow and allow people to sip from your saucer. And I think that is such great advice and exactly what you mentioned. Just, you have to fill yourself up. And even when it's scary, like you said, it could have been a hard thing for the whole family, but somehow the universe worked it out to where you were able to take your vacation. He was able to get his surgery. And I think sometimes we guilt and shame ourselves so bad for taking that time off when we know we need it. But like, what happens when you see those people where one person gets sick and the other person gets sick and the other person ends up, something bad happens to them too, because they were also not practicing self-care while they were caretaking for someone else. So I think that is such an important point, especially right now, because a lot of people are with their families and they're taking care of their families, but they have to still put their self-care first, because when you are well, every person around you is going to be even better.
Yes, absolutely.
What message do you have for that person out there that's just like, I just don't know how to set healthy boundaries for myself. I really don't know how to do it. What advice do you have for them?
Yeah, so I would say that, start small. Start small. Sometimes it's hard depending on your circumstances and who are you around. Sometimes what makes it hard for people to set healthy boundaries too is because of who they're around, their family dynamics and structure. So if you are raised in a family where they depend so much on you and rely on you, and you can't say no, you can't say no and you can say no, but you have chosen not to say no to accommodate your family, but it doesn't keep the peace amongst your own soul. So, there are two different levels. There's, one where you may be the caretaker of someone in your family. And if you are, then knowing, okay, what can I do to delegate those roles in there? Then there's the other part where maybe you're just saying yes to everyone. So you just may be a people pleaser. So if you're a people pleaser, that's up to you to slowly make those changes and know that people are not going to hate you or dislike you because you choose yourself in that moment. You have to ask yourself, at what cost am I going to keep saying yes to people that's going to make myself overwhelmed and burned out?
Right.
So knowing, how to say no, but also to setting boundaries with people. It's a hard thing, but I always tell people, look at your schedule and see, have you placed any time for yourself? If there's an opening in your calendar, take that opening and put your name in there and say, that's my day. Because if you haven't done that, then someone's going to call you and say, hey, what you doing Thursday? And then you're like, oh, I'm free. And let's hang out. And now you hung out with them, but yet you hung out with them and they're sitting there talking. They're just dumping, emotional dumping. They're dumping on you, and you leave that social outing and you don't feel better. You feel like your cup is just empty. Mm-hmm. When you could have spent that Thursday at home by yourself, catching up on Netflix, glass of wine, just relaxing, cooking your favorite meal, just, maybe going to the spa or just staying home and just like engaging in a hobby that you enjoy by yourself, reading a book that you've always wanted to read, but you didn't do that because you gave that time to someone else. So I always tell people, don't overbook yourself. Set some time in your schedule for yourself. Start small, because it's hard to make that transition if you're not used to it. Start small. And also to ask yourself, if you do have a 9-to-5, you have a job, where can you delegate? Because some people say yes to everything. And it's like, am I going above and beyond? Because we know as Black women, we got to work 10 times harder than our counterparts just to only still make, I don't even know if it was like 67 or 64 cents to the dollar of a white man. So just thinking about, okay, what can I do to delegate and know that I'm still good and still worthy to be in this position? I'm going to delegate these roles so that way I don't burn out.
I think that is just the best advice. And I'm just smiling over here because I am so guilty. Oh, I got this time free. I got this time free. And I literally had to start putting myself in my calendar. I think that is the best advice. Everyone listening, put yourself in your calendar, your name with a box, not just, okay, well, I got some free time, so I'm going to do something there. But putting that time, like every morning, I'm like, I'm doing yoga, meditation, journal work, going outside, and all that me time. And sometimes I have friends join me, but that is my time in the morning and in the evening. After 5, work is done. and I'm an entrepreneur, but I set my day up still like I'm working. And then I'm like, done. Work is done. Maybe you take some pictures of your food here and there, but you're not taking any business calls or anything. And I cannot tell you how much peace of mind. It's not perfect. Sometimes I make exceptions, but me just creating, like you said, that time for me in my schedule has helped me so much, especially if you know yourself. Yes, I'm a yes girl. I have to delegate people to help me say no. I was like, I need help. If I say yes to too much, I need you to tell me no. And I have to listen to you. And I love that you gave that advice, because sometimes we just have that type of personality, but just because you have that personality doesn't mean you can't delegate people to help you manage your personality. Also, therapy is something that I want to talk about, because I never knew how important it was, not only to have a therapist, but having a therapist be another Black woman or woman of color, and how important that is. Can you touch on that just a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's really important to have someone who's culturally competent and understands what it's like to be a Black woman. I find that so many people are now looking for therapists who are Black because they felt like, okay, well, I've seen a therapist before and they just don't understand the complexities of a Black woman, or I have to over-explain certain things. So perhaps you had to over-explain the stress that was built up with a job interview, because I don't know if I should go with my braids or if I have to straighten my hair for this job interview, or, the bonnet situation with Monique. So there's so many layers to being a Black woman that sometimes people feel like, okay, I don't know if the therapist understands what I'm going through. And it becomes frustrating. You have to over-explain constantly things about your culture that maybe you feel like someone else won't understand, things about your religion, or you experiencing micro and macro aggression in the workplace, what it's like to witness the loss and death of someone in your family, and what does grief look like in the Black community? What does it look like when we see police brutality and people like George Floyd being murdered by police officers? How does that impact you? Does your therapist understand that? Or do you feel like she does not understand, he does not understand? Perhaps I need to see someone who looks like me. So it's so important to have, someone who's culturally responsive. And I say culturally responsive because you may find a therapist who's not Black and they may be another race or ethnic group, and you find that you connect with them well. I know several therapists who see white therapists and they're like, hey, I love them. They do great work. That's cool too. But if you're looking for a Black therapist, they exist. And I know that's one of the hard things now that's happening now, where people feel like, okay, finding a Black therapist is like finding a unicorn. They're very rare to find, depending where you live too. I know some communities and some rural cities, it's harder to find a Black therapist, where, if you live in New Jersey, New York, you live in a metro city, it may be a bit easier to find a therapist, but it's a matter of, okay, do I find a therapist that can do the work that I'm looking for, that takes my insurance, or is cost a factor, location, availability, all those things play a role. But it's definitely key to have a therapist who understands what it's like to be Black and to be a woman, or perhaps a non-binary person. So it's really important.
I agree. And I love what you said, just, culturally informed, because I do agree, like some people, everyone has a different understanding of culture and experience. And some people, no matter who you are, you might not have that background. So taking it as a case by case basis and really understanding, does this person understand my pain? Do they understand my trauma? And like you said, having to over-explain your situation and still not be understood, it's a thing. And if you feel like that when you have a therapist, chances are you might need to find someone that understands your pain, understands your trauma when you speak of it, and can help you find the healing. But if you share your pain and share your trauma and they're like, wow, you might need to look for someone that says, I understand what you're going through, and can give you some advice, that's not, and it's not average advice. Like I found with my therapist, like there's so much skill. I feel like she's definitely a unicorn, because it's so much skill in a person being able to take you through from tears to laughter every single session, I think that's a gift, to take you deep enough to do the work that you need to do to relieve the trauma, and then bring you high enough that you can actually realize like, oh my goodness, I am more than this. I am more than my trauma. I am more than my pain. It is a gift. I mean, I'm a lucky woman, and, I try to give my therapist to people, but she doesn't have any more openings. So, but my prayers for everyone that they can find a therapist that can help, because it's not easy, especially as an entrepreneur. And that's kind of where I want to go next, because, we have a lot of women who listen to this podcast, women and men. We have a lot of people, but especially women who are entrepreneurs. And especially at this time, the demand is high, but being able to balance out that work and mental health. So what is your advice on really learning? Because I know you have to do it as a therapist. You're one of the unicorns that everyone wants. So how do you balance out your work schedule?
Yeah. So for me, I am big on executive functioning skills. So executive functioning skills, and there's a book called Strength Finders. So I think it's important for people to know their strengths and their weaknesses and really plan out their day. And as you're planning out your day, setting time and intention every single day for your mental health, something that's going to increase your well-being and in a way that benefits you. So what does it look like for self-care, for the health of your business, and also for your personal life? And I find that as entrepreneurs, you feel like you constantly have to keep going. There's a lot of comparison that's happening. There's a lot of, gurus on the internet that's telling you this is how things need to be done and how you need to do your business. And now you find yourself, running in this rat race. You're part of this grind culture, and you're going and going and going, and you never get a break. You never have time to spend with your family, your close friends, people who are not entrepreneurs. You find yourself just constantly in work mode. You go on vacation, you have your laptop with you, you're sending out newsletters, you're answering phone calls, you're scheduling consultations, you're trying to book the next opportunity. You don't want to lose out on money. You want to hit 6 and 7 and 8 figures. And this happens all the time with entrepreneurs. And I really want them to get to a place where they can have some sort of alignment in their work and in their home life. It's so important, because you will find that when you rest, it gives opportunity for you to be a bit more creative. You have more time to be creative. You have more space to flow naturally. You will find that you're not constantly stuck. But sometimes what people do is they feel like I have to keep going. They put their emotions to the side and just keep going. So it's okay to take a break. So schedule those breaks where they're just a daily thing. It's part of your routine. It's part of your natural routine, just like running your business.
I love that. Scheduling those breaks. I mean, that's literally what I do. I don't let any meetings go back to back anymore. I ask for 15 to 30-minute breaks. And just even before this meeting, I was like, I need about 30 more minutes, And so being able to flow and know that you're not going to miss out. The work is still going to be there. There's so many people that need help in the world today, that when you are good at what you do, and when you take time, like you said, to really sharpen your craft and fill yourself up, then you're able to do your job even better. And when you do your job even better, your demand is increased. So that is so amazing. So I want to take you through our speed round at the end, but I always let people go long if they want to. But just to give people some insight on the best book you've read and some of the best podcasts you've listened to. So we'll start with the best book. So what is the best book you've read in the last year?
That's a hard one. Okay, so the best book I read in the last year has been Traction by Gino Wickman. So it's all about business and how to run your business and setting up an organizational chart. Like, it was just really good, like how to really run your business like a well-oiled machine, so you can start pulling yourself out of there. So I think it was great for business owners that are looking to set boundaries and have better self-care for their lives. Like, it's a great book.
Wow, I'm putting that on my list because I haven't read it. And what's been your favorite podcast to listen to in the last year?
In the last year, I will say so many podcasts. One of the podcasts that I really enjoy is Access and Opportunity by Carla Harris. She is a VP at Morgan Stanley. So I really love her podcast because she talks about just when it comes to access and opportunity with funding for the minority community. So I just really love how she interviews entrepreneurs and investors and listening to their stories and how they started their business. And it's amazing.
Putting that on my list as well. Give me all these new ones. And if you could change anything in the world, what would you change? What do you think would make a big impact right now?
Right now, what would make a big impact if I was able to help Congress, policymakers, to create some sort of access, a better access and streamline for mental health as it relates to adolescents, especially Black youth, because right now, the death by suicide rates is increasing for Black youth. There are also mental health concerns for Black youth. So I feel like if they were able to create a better streamlined process where mental health was accessible and it was available in the schools for every single adolescent, I think that would help to change the game because they are the next generation of leaders.
Absolutely. What do you feel is the cause of the spike in those cases?
So I think the rates are high right now because a lot of our adolescent youth are dealing with complex trauma. Also, too, when we look at mental health concerns for Black youth, they do not look the same as white youth. So we have to think about how they are dealing with racial and gender discrimination, how they're constantly being pushed out of the school system. So whether it's the school to prison pipeline, because Black girls are 6 to 7 times more likely to be suspended than white girls for the same exact behaviors. So how does that really impact them? When they are viewing things on the internet that relates to urban policing or the situation like with George Floyd, how does that really impact a Black youth compared to a white youth? Are they concerned and scared that, would this happen with my mom or dad? So the stress that they experience with police interaction, how does COVID impact them in their community? Access to quality healthcare providers. So there are so many layers to this where to me, it's a public health crisis. And if we don't pay attention to this, we're not going to create any solutions. So we really have to treat this like a public health crisis and get to the core of it. And the core of it always boils down to systemic racism. It goes back to that because if you go back 50, 60, 70 years ago, you will see it there. You will see it with the Brown versus Board of Education. You will see it with so many different things with how the juvenile justice system was created. How, we have a lot of Black youth that are in foster care system, but they're less likely to be adopted than white youth. So you notice these issues happen in various situations. So how does it make our Black girls, like for instance, Black girls, they always feel like they're invisible. And it's the reality of what they're experiencing. So if they feel invisible, how is their mental health being impacted? And they feel isolated, they feel alone. So we really have to hone in into those areas and even look at when I look at therapists, as far as social workers, I believe 70 to 80% of social workers are white social workers. So if there's not that many therapists that represent us in the community, how safe will they feel to go and see someone? So we have to think about all those layers.
You spoke on so much. And I, like I said, I hope everyone listening goes out and grab a copy of your book. And really, we just start to have the conversations because the conversations are going to push those things forward. And hopefully you're able to help just change the systemic racism. We have to change the systems. We have to change how we operate as communities. We have to see the change in our government. And so I'm just praying for that change. I'm pushing for that change. And I'm so happy that you just said yes to this podcast so we could just get this message of change out to as many people as possible, because that's really what's going to push the needle forward. So thank you so much for being on today. Is there anything else you want to share with the community?
Definitely get the book, support the book. And also too, in the near future, we also have an e-learning curriculum that is coming out. It is actually almost done. I'm at the finishing touches of it. So the goal is to see if the schools would be willing to purchase it and have like a 1-year access to the curriculum. So that way the girls are able to have access to it, because not everyone has access to therapy, but this will be a learning module where they can learn about the state of Black girls, learn about anxiety, depression, and tips and tools to navigate, school and goal settings and college planning. So I'm hoping that, schools will be receptive to this, along with organizations that are looking for something where maybe you can't get a speaker to come in, but you'd like to have the learning module for all the girls to have access to.
That is powerful. Thank you so much for sharing that. I definitely want to see how we can continue and be a part of that e-course as well. I know it's going to be wonderful for the Get Loved Up community. So thank you so much for that. And then just let everyone know where they can find you.
Yeah, so you can find me at marlinefrancois.com. On all my social media platforms, it's Marline Francois. And also to my therapy practice, if you are located in the state of New Jersey, it's heartsempowerment.com, which is for Hearts Empowerment Counseling Center.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being here. It's an honor to have you.
Thank you so much for having me.
And thank you all so much for listening. I know this was powerful. Please share your takeaways with me and Marline. Find us on social. Tag us in the comments with your favorite takeaways. We are going to continue to push for this initiative of mental health. It's not going to stop. It's not just for 1 month for me. It is a huge initiative within the Get Loved Up community. So if you had things that really spoke to your heart, share it with someone else. Share this story with someone else. Leave a review. Let us know what your biggest takeaway was so we know what's making the biggest impact. And most of all, just thank you for listening. Thank you for being a part of this community. And until next time, love yourself, love others, and love the world. One day at a time, one breath at a time. Peace and love.
I just want to take a moment to say thank you for being part of the Get Loved Up community. I like to share topics and people making a positive impact in the world, and your feedback means the world to me. If you haven't already left a review, please leave a 5-star review and let me know what you want to hear more of on the show. I'm here for you, and together we're making the world a better place, one day at a time, one show at a time. Thank you for listening.